The stars had always called to Jake Wilson when he was a boy growing up in a small town in Texas. He would lie on his back in the tall grass and watch the night sky for hours. He never imagined that one day those distant lights would become his battlefield. Now at 32 years old, Captain Jake Wilson stood in the command center of the starship Aurora, watching a planet he had never seen before grow larger in the viewing window. The world was beautiful. Its surface glittered like someone had scattered diamonds across blue and green continents. This was Valora Prime, home to the Valoran Empire. "You nervous?" asked Danny Park, his best friend and fellow soldier. Danny was shorter than Jake, with quick eyes that never missed anything. They had fought together in 3 different wars across the galaxy, and Danny knew Jake better than anyone. Jake turned from the window. "Should I be? The Valorans have never asked for human help before," Danny said. "They always thought they were better than us, stronger, smarter. Now they're desperate enough to offer one of their princesses in marriage to a human soldier. That's not normal." Jake nodded slowly. He had read the reports. The Devourer swarm was coming. This enemy was not like anything the galaxy had faced before. The swarm did not conquer planets, they ate them. Every living thing, every plant, every animal, every person. 12 civilizations had already fallen to them. 12 entire species wiped from existence. The Valorans were next in line. Earth Command had chosen Jake for this mission. Because of his record, he had never lost a battle. He had never abandoned his soldiers. He treated alien species with respect, even the ones that looked down on humans. The generals believed he was the perfect man to create an alliance with the Valorans, but Jake knew the truth. This mission was not just about making friends, it was a test. The Valorans wanted to see what kind of people humans really were. Whatever choice Jake made would show them the heart of humanity. The ship descended through clouds that sparkled with strange colors. When they landed, Jake stepped onto alien soil for the first time in his life. The ground beneath his boots was smooth, almost like glass. Enormous crystal towers rose around them, catching the light of 2 suns and breaking it into rainbows. Thousands of Valor had gathered to see the human arrive. They were tall beings standing at least 7 feet high. Their bodies were covered in scales that gleamed like precious metals. Most of them had scales of gold, copper, or bronze. Their eyes were large and ancient, holding knowledge of stars that humans had not yet discovered. They watched Jake with a mixture of curiosity and doubt. A group of guards in ceremonial armor led Jake and Danny through the crowd. The Valorans whispered to each other as they passed. Jake caught fragments of their words, translated by the small device in his ear. "So small. Is this really their champion? They sent one man to save us." Jake kept his face calm. He had faced worse than whispers. He had faced death itself and walked away. The guards brought them to the Imperial Palace, structure so massive that Jake could not see where it ended. Inside, the walls were covered with images of Valoran history, victories, and ancient wars. Great leaders who had expanded the empire, beautiful princesses who had married powerful kings. At the end of a long hall, a throne made of pure crystal waited. Sitting upon it was Emperor Tovan, ruler of the Valoran Empire. The emperor was old. His scales had faded from gold to a pale yellow, and his movements were slow and careful, but his eyes were still sharp. When he looked at Jake, the human felt like his entire soul was being examined. "Captain Jake Wilson," the Emperor said. His voice echoed through the hall. "Humanity sends a single soldier to answer our call for alliance. One soldier was all you asked." "For your majesty," Jake replied. He did not bow. Danny had told him that Valorans respected those who stood straight before power. The Emperor and LT Unk and GT's mouth curved slightly. It might have been a smile, honest. "Good, lies would not help either of us." Now, he rose from his throne and walked slowly down the steps. When he stood before Jake, the human had to look up to meet his eyes. "You know why you are here," the Emperor said. "You want an alliance, a real one, sealed by marriage." "Yes, my empire faces extinction. The swarm will reach us in less than 2 months. Our fleets are strong, but not strong enough. We need human weapons, human soldiers, human courage." Jake listened carefully. "And in exchange, you offer one of your daughters." "I offer more than that." Emperor and LT Unk and GT's voice grew heavy with emotion. "I offer you the right to choose which daughter. Tomorrow you will meet all 5 of my children. You will spend time with each of them, and when you have seen them all, you will make your selection." Danny shifted uncomfortably beside Jake. This was unusual in most alien marriage alliances. The choice was made by the family offering the bride. To let the outsider choose was either a great honor or a trap. "Why me?" Jake asked. "Why? Let me decide." The Emperor turned and walked back to his throne. He sat down slowly, and for a moment he looked very tired. "Because I want to see what humans truly value," he said. "My daughters are all different. One is beautiful beyond measure. One is a fierce warrior. One is clever with words. One is brilliant with science. And one," he paused, "one is different in ways that my people do not appreciate." Jake caught the sadness in the Emperor and LT Unk and GT's voice, but did not ask about it. "Your choice will tell me everything I need to know about your species," the Emperor continued. "If humans prove worthy, we will fight beside you until the last star dies. If not," he left the sentence unfinished. The message was clear: choose wrong and the alliance would fail. Choose wrong, and both species might die. That night, Jake stood on a balcony of the guest quarters, looking out at the crystal city below. Danny joined him with 2 cups of hot tea. Command sent their instructions. Danny said quietly, "They want you to pick Princess Enchi, the eldest, the most politically powerful, best choice for Earth." Jake took the tea but did not drink. "What do you think?" "I think the Emperor is testing us. He wants to know if we see people as tools or as people." Jake nodded slowly. Somewhere in this palace, 5 princesses were waiting to meet him. One of them would become his wife. One of them would help decide the fate of 2 civilizations. He thought about what the Emperor had said: 4 daughters that the Valorans admired and one that they did not appreciate. He wondered about that one. Above him the stars burned cold and bright. Somewhere out there the swarm was moving closer, hungry and endless. Time was running out. Tomorrow everything would begin. Jake raised his tea to the night sky. "Let's hope I make the right choice." Danny stood beside him in silence. Neither of them slept much that night. The Grand Selection Hall was the most beautiful room Jake had ever seen. Crystal pillars reached toward a ceiling so high that clouds actually floated. Inside the building, light from the twin suns poured through windows made of colored glass, painting everything in shades of gold and red and blue. Thousands of Velerans filled the viewing galleries. They had come from across the empire to watch the human meet their princesses. Jake felt their eyes on him as he walked to the center of the hall. He kept his back straight and his face calm. Emperor Tovin sat on a raised platform with his advisors. He nodded to Jake and then raised his hand. Let the princesses enter, he announced. The first to appear was Princess, and she was stunning. Her scales were pure gold, brighter than anyone else in the room. She was tall, even for a velour, and she moved with the grace of someone who knew exactly how powerful she was. Jewels hung from her neck and wrists. Her dress was made of some fabric that seemed to hold starlight itself. She stopped before Jake and looked down at him. Her eyes were cold. So you are the human, she said. Her voice was beautiful but empty, like a song without feeling. I expected someone taller. Jake met her gaze without backing down. Height doesn't win wars, Your Highness. Her golden eyes narrowed. For a moment, something like interest flickered across her face, then it was gone. She turned and walked to her designated seat. Without another word, Dany leaned close to Jake. She didn't like that. Good. Jake whispered back, I don't like being looked down on. The second princess was Sora. Where Nara was beauty, Sora was strength. Her copper scales were marked with scars from countless battles. She wore armor instead of a dress, and a sword hung at her side. She did not greet Jake with words. Instead, she drew her blade and tossed a second sword to him. Catch, she said. Jake caught the weapon and immediately had to block her first strike. The crowd gasped. The sound of metal against metal rang through the hall as they fought. Sora was fast, faster than any human. But Jake had trained his entire life for combat. He read her movements, anticipated her attacks, and held his ground. They fought for 3 full minutes before Sora finally stepped back, breathing hard. You are not weak, she admitted. There was surprise in her voice and maybe a little respect. For a human, thank you, Jake said, handing back the sword. For a princess, you fight pretty well too. Sora laughed. It was a real laugh, not the fake politeness he expected from royalty. She walked to her seat with a genuine smile on her face. The third princess was Hana. She had bronze scales and a face that was designed for smiling. She approached Jake with open arms and warm words. Captain Wilson, what an honor to meet you. I have studied so much about human culture. Your music, your art, your history. Truly fascinating. She talked quickly and constantly praising everything about Jake and humanity. She asked about his family, his home, his favorite foods. Every answer he gave was met with delight and more compliments. But Jake noticed something. Her eyes never matched her smile, while her mouth said kind words. Her gaze was calculating, measuring, judging. She was not talking to him, she was performing for him. When she finally left, Dany shook his head. She's dangerous. Everything she said was exactly what you wanted to hear. I know, Jake agreed. That's what worries me. The fourth princess was Mira. Her scales were silver white and she wore simple clothes. Without any jewels, she carried a small device in her hands that blinked with lights. She did not greet Jake at all. Instead, she walked around him in a circle, scanning him with her device. Interesting, she muttered. Human. Biology is remarkably adaptable. Your species can survive in conditions that would kill most others. She looked up at him with curious eyes. Does it hurt when you breathe our air a little? Jake admitted. The oxygen levels are different, yet you adapt. Fascinating. She made a note on her device. Humans are like water. You fill whatever container holds you. Perhaps that is your true strength. She walked away without saying goodbye, already lost in her own thoughts. Of all the princesses, she was the hardest to read. She did not seem to care about politics or power. She only cared about knowledge. Finally, it was time for the fifth princess. The hall grew quiet. Jake noticed that some Valorans looked uncomfortable. Others whispered behind their hands. Even the Emperor and LT, Unk and GT's face became unreadable. Princess Yuri entered from a side door, not the grand entrance the others had used. She walked slowly, keeping her head down. Her dress was plain without any decoration, and her scales were wrong where her sisters shone with gold and copper and bronze. Yuri's scales were pale silver, almost white among the Valorans. This was considered a flaw, a defect. She looked like a ghost among the living. She stopped several feet away from Jake, not meeting his eyes. I am Princess Yuri, she said quietly. I apologize that you must waste your time with me. Jake frowned. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Why would meeting you be a waste of time? Yuri finally looked up. Her eyes widened with surprise. No one had ever asked her that question before. Because I am not like my sisters, she said carefully. I am not beautiful like Nara. I cannot fight like Sora. I do not have Hana's charm or Mira's brilliance. I am simply she struggled for words less. Jake studied her face. Unlike her sisters, there was no mask here, no performance, just honest sadness and quiet strength. Where I come from, Jake said gently, the stars that shine the brightest aren't always the best ones to follow. Sometimes the dim ones lead you home. Yuri stared at him for a moment. Something flickered beneath her silver scales, a soft glow there, and gone so quickly that Jake almost missed it. Thank you, she whispered. Then she hurried away to the darkest corner of the hall. That night there was a formal dinner. Jake sat at the main table with the Emperor and the princesses. He made polite conversation, answered questions, and played the political game as best he could, but his eyes kept wandering to the far end of the table where Yuri sat alone. He watched as servants ignored her. He watched as Kurters made jokes at her expense, not even trying to hide their words. He watched as her hands trembled beneath the table, fighting to stay calm, and he watched as that strange glow appeared again beneath her scales just for a second. Whenever her emotions grew strong, no one else noticed. They were too busy admiring her golden sisters. Later, Danny found Jake standing by a window, lost in thought. Earth Command confirmed. Danny said they want in. She has the most political power, best choice for the Alliance. Jake did not respond. Jake, did you hear me? I heard you. Jake turned from the window. His mind was made up. But I'm not choosing ND and LT. Unk and GT. Wise eyes went wide. What, Jake? This isn't a game. Fate of I know what's at stake. Jake's voice was firm, and that's exactly why I'm going to make the choice that matters, not the choice that looks good. Jake's voice. He walked away, leaving Danny standing in the moonlight, worried about what tomorrow would bring. The selection ceremony was broadcast to every corner of the Valoran Empire. Billions of aliens watched from their homes, their ships, their military posts. On Earth, millions more gathered around screens, waiting to see which princess the human soldier would choose. Jake stood in the center of the grand hall, dressed in his formal military uniform, the medals on his chest caught the light. Behind him, Dany watched with nervous eyes. The 5 princesses sat on a raised platform beside their father. Nara looked confident, certain that she would be chosen. Sara appeared calm, ready to accept whatever happened. Hannah smiled her practiced smile. Mira was reading something on her device, not paying attention, and Yuri sat at the end, small and quiet, expecting nothing. Emperor Tovin rose from his throne. The hall fell silent. People of Valora, the Emperor announced, today we witness history. For the first time, an alien will choose a bride from our royal family. His choice will seal an alliance between our empire and the humans of Earth. It will determine our future in the war against the swarm. He turned to Jake. Captain Wilson, you have met my daughters. You have seen their strengths and their natures. Now before the Empire, make your choice. The entire galaxy held its breath. Jake looked at each princess in turn. Nar met his eyes with pride. Sora nodded at him with warrior's respect. Hannah winked playfully. Mira glanced up briefly from her device. Yuri kept her eyes on the floor. Then Jake spoke. His voice was clear and strong, designed to reach every corner of the hall. I choose Princess Yuri. For one long second there was silence. Then the hall exploded. Voices shouted in disbelief. Nobles rose from their seats in anger. Even the guards looked shocked. On the platform, Nara's face twisted with rage. Hannah's smile vanished completely. Only Sora and Mira remained calm, watching. With curious eyes, Yuri herself looked like she had been struck. Her silver scales had gone even paler. She stared at Jake as if he had spoken in a language she did not understand. Emperor Tovin raised his hand for silence. When the noise finally died down, his voice was cold. Is this a joke, Captain? Do you mock us by choosing our weakest daughter? No, Your Majesty. Jake did not back down. I am completely serious. Then explain yourself. The Emperor's eyes burned with anger. Explain why you would insult my empire by selecting the one daughter that even her own people consider worthless. Jake felt the weight of 1 billion eyes upon him. This was the moment everything depended on. He took a deep breath and began. Your Majesty, I spent the last 3 days watching, not just the princesses but everyone, your nobles, your servants, your soldiers. I learned a lot about valor and culture. You value beauty, you value strength. You value charm and intelligence. These are not bad values. He paused. But you have made a mistake, a terrible mistake that could have cost you everything. The Emperor leaned forward. What mistake? You measure worth by what you can see. Jake turned to look directly at Yuri, but some things cannot be seen. At first glance, some things can only be discovered by paying attention. He walked toward the platform, speaking as he moved. Every night since I arrived, I have had trouble sleeping, so I walked the palace. And every night I saw Princess Yuri leave her chambers in secret. Gasps filled the hall. Yuri's eyes went wide with fear. She went to the military hospital. Jake continued. The place where your wounded soldiers wait to die. The ones too injured to save. The ones that everyone else has given up on. Whispers stopped. Everyone was listening. Now she sat with them. She held their hand. She listened to their stories. She learned their names, their homes, their families. She stayed with them until they passed so they would not die alone, and then she went to the next one. Jake stopped before the platform and looked up at the Emperor. Your beautiful daughters were sleeping in silk beds. Your warrior daughter was dreaming of glory. Your clever daughter was planning political moves. Your brilliant daughter was studying science. But your forgotten daughter was doing what none of them would do. She was showing kindness to those who had nothing left to give her. The hall was completely silent now among humans. Jake said, "We have a saying, the true measure of a person is how they treat those who cannot help them. By that measure, Princess Yuri is worth more than all her sisters combined." Tears were running down Yuri's face. She made no sound, but her whole body was shaking. But Jake was not finished. "And there is something else," he said. "Something I noticed that your own people have missed." He turned to address the entire hall. "I have fought the swarm scouts. I have studied their communication patterns. They use a specific frequency of light to coordinate their attacks. Only one species in galactic history ever found a way to disrupt that frequency. The Luminari." And the name sent a shock wave through the crowd. The Luminari were legends, an ancient civilization that had faced the swarm thousands of years ago. They were the only ones who had ever survived, and then they vanished, leaving no trace behind. Luminari had scales that glowed with silver light. Jake continued, "They could generate energy that disrupted swarm communication. It was their greatest weapon." He pointed at Yuri. "I have watched Princess Yuri for 3 days. When her emotions are strong, her scales glow just like the Luminari, just like the only species that ever defeated your enemy." Every eye in the hall turned to Yuri. "She is not defective," Jake declared. "She is evolved. She carries Luminari DNA. The power to fight the swarm has been sleeping in your own family this whole time, and you nearly threw it away because her scales were the wrong color." Emperor Tovan stood slowly. His face was no longer angry. It was shocked. He stepped down from his throne and walked toward his youngest daughter. "Yuri," he said softly, "is this true?" Yuri looked at her hands. As everyone watched, a soft silver glow began to spread across her scales. It grew brighter and brighter until she was shining like a star. "I do not know what I am," she whispered. "I have always been able to do this, but I was afraid. I thought it was another defect, another reason to be ashamed." The emperor fell to his knees before his daughter. It was a gesture that no Valoran ruler had made in 10,000 years. "My child," he said, his voice breaking, "forgive me, forgive us all." The hall was silent. Guards, nobles, servants, all watching their emperor kneel before the daughter they had mocked and ignored. Jake stepped back, giving them space. Dani appeared at his side, looking stunned. "How did you know?" Dani whispered. "How did you figure out the Luminari connection?" Jake watched Yuri help her father to his feet, watch the light spreading from her scales to illuminate the entire hall. "I didn't know for sure," he admitted. "I took a chance." "You gambled the entire alliance on a guess?" Jake shook his head. "No, I would have chosen her anyway. The glowing was just extra proof. I chose her because she was the only one who saw me as a person instead of a political tool. I chose her because she showed kindness when no one was watching. On the platform, Yuri turned to look at Jake. Through her tears, she smiled. It was the first real smile he had seen on any princess since arriving. In that moment, Jake knew he had made the right choice. The future was uncertain. The swarm was still coming. War was still ahead. But for now, in this moment, something had changed. Something important. Something that could never be undone. The weeks following Jake's selection were like a dream. Everything that the Valorans thought they knew about Princess Yuri was wrong, and the entire empire was struggling to understand what that meant. Scientists from across the galaxy arrived to study her. They took samples of her scales, measured her energy output, and compared her DNA to ancient Luminari records found in forgotten archives. The results shocked everyone. Yuri was not just carrying Luminari genes. She was the most complete Luminari descendant discovered in over 3,000 years. The power sleeping inside her was greater than anything the scientists had ever measured. It is remarkable, said the lead researcher, a Valoran named Elder Voss. The Luminari were thought to be completely extinct. We believed their bloodline had been diluted beyond recovery, but somehow in your youngest daughter the genes have reassembled. She is in effect a Luminari reborn. Emperor Tovan listened to this news with a complicated expression. Pride and shame fought for control of his face. He had spent years ignoring Yuri, letting his court mock her, treating her as an embarrassment. Now he was learning that she might be the key to saving his entire civilization. Can she fight the swarm? The Emperor asked. In theory, yes. The Luminari could generate energy shields and disruption frequencies that confused swarm communication. Princess Yuri should be able to do the same. Elder Voss paused. But she has never been trained. Her powers are raw, uncontrolled. We have less than 3 weeks before the swarm arrives. That may not be enough time. Jake stepped forward. I'll train her. Everyone in the room turned to look at him with respect. Captain Wilson, Elder Voss said carefully, you are not a Luminari. You do not possess these powers. How can you train someone in abilities you do not understand? I can't teach her how to glow, Jake admitted. But I can teach her how to fight, how to stay calm under pressure, how to use her strength when everything around her is chaos. Those skills are universal. Emperor considered this for a long moment. Then he nodded. Very well, train my daughter, Captain. Teach her to be a warrior. And so the training began. Every day, Jake and Yuri met in the palace training grounds. He taught her human combat techniques, breathing exercises, and mental focus. She taught him about Valoran culture, history, and her people's way of seeing the universe. At first, Yuri's powers were wild. When she tried to create an energy shield, it would flicker and collapse. When she attempted the disruption frequency, it came out as random noise. She grew frustrated and ashamed. I cannot do this, she said. One evening, sitting on the ground with her head in her hands, everyone is counting on me and I am failing. Jake sat down beside her. You're not failing, you're learning, but there is no time to learn. The swarm will be here soon. My people will die because I am not strong enough. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke softly. Do you know why humans became good at war? Yuri looked up at him. It wasn't because we're stronger than other species. We're actually pretty weak. It wasn't because we were smarter. Plenty of aliens are smarter than us. It was because we refused to give up when everything looked hopeless, when all the odds were against us. We kept fighting anyway. He met her silver eyes. Your power isn't in your scales, Yuri. It's in your heart. You spent years being mocked and ignored, and you never became cruel. You kept being kind. You kept caring about others. That kind of strength doesn't break. Yuri stared at him. Something shifted in her expression, like a wall coming down. You truly believe that? She whispered. I know it. The next day, Yuri's training improved dramatically. Her shields held longer. Her frequencies became clearer. The scientists were amazed at her progress, but it was not just her powers that grew. The relationship between Jake and Yuri deepened as well. What began as political arrangements slowly transformed into something real. They talked late into the night about their dreams and fears. Jake told her about Earth, about the blue oceans and green forests, about the family he had left behind to serve in the military. Yuri told him about her childhood, about the loneliness of being different, about the soldiers she had comforted in the hospital. You were the first person to see me, she said one night as they watched the twin moons rise over the crystal city. Not my scales, not my status, just me. Jake took her hand. Her scales were cool against his skin, and they glowed faintly at his touch. I could say the same about you, he replied. Every other princess saw a tool. You saw a person. They did not need to say more. Some things did not require words, but the growing love between them was not the only thing happening in the palace. Princess Nara had not forgotten her humiliation. She had been certain that she would be chosen, that she would lead the alliance with humanity. Instead, she had been passed over for her weakest sister. Her pride burned with fury. In secret, she began plotting. If she could not have the alliance, perhaps she could destroy it. She met with nobles who shared her anger, whispering about how Jake had insulted valor and values, how Yuri's power was exaggerated, how the humans were manipulating them. Princess Sora discovered the plot by accident. She confronted Nara alone in her chambers. You would betray your own people, Sora demanded. The swarm is coming and you are playing political games. The swarm would not be coming if Father had been stronger, Nara hissed. If he had built better fleets instead of wasting resources on hospitals and charity. Yuri and LT Unk and GT's kindness will not stop the devourers. Sora drew her sword. I should report you to Father and cause a civil war on the eve of battle. Nara laughed coldly. You are a warrior, Sora. You know that a divided army loses. You will stay silent, or you will doom us all. It was a trap, and Sora knew it. She lowered her sword but did not put it away. I will be watching you, she warned. If you do anything to harm the alliance, I will end you myself. Sister or not, In only smiled. While the princesses fought their quiet war, Dani brought news that changed everything. The swarm has accelerated, he reported. To Jake and the Emperor, they changed course 3 days ago. They're no longer following the predicted path. Where are they heading? The Emperor asked. Dani and LT Unk and GT's face was grim. Straight for Valera Prime. They'll be here in 3 weeks. Instead of 6, it's like they know about Yuri, like they want to eliminate her before her power fully awakens. Room fell silent. 3 weeks was not enough time, Yuri's training was progressing, but she was not ready for a full-scale battle. Jake felt cold fear in his chest, but he did not let it show. He turned to the Emperor. Call your fleets home, every ship you have, and send word to Earth. Tell them we need everything they can spare. You think humanity will come? The Emperor asked. I don't think I know. Jake's voice was firm. We made an alliance. Humans don't break their promises. That night Jake found Yuri standing on her balcony, staring at the stars. Her scales were glowing brighter than ever, but her face was troubled. They're coming for me, she said without turning around. The swarm, they know what I am, what I could do. Jake stood beside her. Then we'll face them together. What if I'm not strong enough? Then we'll find another way. That's what humans do. We adapt, we survive, and we never ever give up. Yuri turned to him in the light of the moons, with her scales shining like captured starlight. She looked beautiful and terrifying and wonderful all at once. I was alone for so long, she said softly. I had accepted that I would always be alone. And then you came. Jake touched her face gently. You're not alone anymore. She leaned into his hand. Her scales pulsed with warmth. Whatever happens, she whispered, I am glad that you chose me. So am I. Above them, the stars turned slowly in the endless dark. Somewhere out there, the swarm was coming. Death was coming. The greatest battle in galactic history was coming. But in this moment, standing together on the balcony of a crystal palace, a human soldier and an alien princess found something worth fighting for, and that made all the difference. The sky above Prime turned black on the 21st day. It was not night. The twin suns still shone somewhere above, but so many swarm ships had entered the system that they blocked out the light itself. Millions of vessels, each one carrying thousands of devourers hungry for flesh and blood and life. Jake stood on the command platform of the Valoran flagship, surrounded by officers and soldiers. Beside him, Emperor Tavan watched his empire's final battle begin. On holographic screens around them, fleet positions flickered and changed as ships moved into formation. The Valoran armada was impressive. 3,000 warships, the pride of an ancient civilization, armed with weapons that could shatter moons. But against the swarm's endless numbers, they looked like candles in a hurricane. Then the human fleet arrived. 1,200 ships burst out of faster-than-light travel, forming up behind the Valoran lines. They were smaller than Valoran vessels, less elegant in design, but they were fast. And they were heavily armed, and they were crewed by soldiers who never knew when to quit. Admiral Tor's voice crackled over the communication system. Earthfleet reporting for duty. Sorry, we're late, Captain Wilson. Traffic was terrible. Jake smiled. Despite everything, better late than never. Admiral, form up with the Valoran Third Wing, and Admiral, give them everything with pleasure. The battle began with fire. The swarm attacked in waves, endless waves that crashed against the Allied lines like an ocean against rocks. Ships exploded, soldiers died. The Valorans fought with cold precision, while the humans fought with desperate fury. Together they held the line, but it was not enough. For every swarm ship they destroyed, 10 more took its place. Enemy did not care about losses. They did not feel fear or doubt. They only knew hunger. We are being overwhelmed, Emperor Tovan said quietly, his voice held no panic, only acceptance. The fleets cannot hold much longer, Jake. Watch the battle unfold on the screens. Somewhere behind him, Danny was coordinating ground forces, preparing for the moment when the swarm broke through and attacked the planet itself. That moment was coming soon. Where is Yuri? Jake asked. The planetary defense nexus, the Emperor replied. She insisted. She said that if the swarm reaches the surface, she needs to be ready. Jake nodded. He had argued against it, wanting Yuri safe, but she had refused to hide while others died. For her, she was a princess, she said. Her place was with her people. He loved her for that, and he feared for her. On the screens, a new signature appeared. It was massive, larger than any swarm ship they had seen before. The Swarm Queen's vessel. The Queen is moving toward the planet, an officer reported, his voice shaking. She's breaking through our lines. We can't stop her. The Queen's ship was a nightmare made of metal and flesh. It pushed through the Allied fleet like a knife through paper, absorbing damage that would have destroyed any other vessel. Behind it, a stream of smaller ships followed, heading straight for Valera Prime. All ground forces prepare for impact. D and LT Unk and GT. Y's voice came over the communication channel. They're coming down. Jake made his decision. Emperor, I'm transferring to the surface. My place is with the ground troops. Too looked at him with old, tired eyes. And with my daughter. Yes, the Emperor placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. Bring her back safe, Captain. She is the best of us. She always was. Jake did not trust himself to speak. He simply nodded and ran. The drop pod hit atmosphere like a meteor. Jake felt his bones shake as the vehicle screamed through the sky, surrounded by fire and chaos. Below, the crystal cities of Valera Prime glittered one last time before the darkness covered them. He landed hard in the central square of the capital, where Danny had established the command post. All around him, human and Valoran soldiers stood together, weapons raised. Facing the sky, Jake. Danny ran toward him. The Queen's ship is overhead. Landing pods are dropping everywhere. We've got maybe 20 minutes before they reach the city center. And Yuri Nexus Tower north side. She's generating some kind of field disrupting their communications. It's working, but Danny hesitated. But what? She's burning out. Jake, the power is too much. Her scales are turning white. If she doesn't stop, it'll kill her. Jake did not waste another second. He ran. The streets of the capital were chaos. Swarm creatures had already landed in the outer districts, and the sounds of fighting echoed between the crystal towers. Jake pushed through it all, ignoring the danger, ignoring the pain in his legs, focusing only on reaching her. The Nexus Tower rose above the city like a spear of light. At its peak, Yuri stood alone, her arms raised to the sky. Her entire body was glowing so brightly that she looked like a small sun. Energy poured from her scales, spreading across the city in waves that made the swarm creatures scream and stumble. But Danny was right. She was dying. Jake could see it in her posture, in the way her light flickered and surged. She was giving everything she had, burning her own life force to protect her people. He fought his way into the tower and climbed. His lungs burned. His muscles screamed, but he did not stop. When he reached the top, Yuri did not see him. Her eyes were closed, her face twisted with concentration and pain. Cracks were spreading across her silver scales. Light poured from the cracks like blood. "Yuri!" Jake shouted. Her eyes opened. For a moment they were not her eyes anymore, they were pure white light. Ancient and terrible. Then she recognized him and she smiled. "Jake," she whispered, "you came, I'll always come." He stepped closer, fighting against the energy that pushed at him. Like a hurricane wind. "You have to stop. You're killing yourself. If I stop, they will overrun the city. Everyone will die. If you don't stop, you will die." She looked at him with love and sadness. "Then I die protecting my people. There are worse ways to go." Jake grabbed her hand. The moment their skin touched, something changed. The energy that had been tearing Yuri apart suddenly stabilized. Her light stopped flickering and became steady, like a heartbeat finding its rhythm. Yuri's eyes widened. What are you doing?" Jake did not understand either, but he felt it. His own bioelectric field, the tiny spark of energy that all living things carried, was connecting to hers, stabilizing her, grounding her. "Humans are adaptable," he said, remembering Mira's words. "We fill whatever container holds us." He was becoming her anchor. "Together," he said. "We do this together." Yuri stared at him, then she nodded and her grip on his hand tightened. The light that exploded from them was blinding. It swept across the entire planet in a single heartbeat, a wave of pure luminary energy that touched every swarm creature on Valera Prime. The Devourers screamed. Their communication network, the thing that made them a single unified mind, was torn apart. Suddenly they were not an army anymore. They were millions of confused, frightened animals, unable to coordinate, unable to think above the planet. The Swarm Queen felt her children die. For the first time in her ancient existence, she felt fear and she fled. Her massive ship turned and ran, dragging the remnants of the swarm fleet with her. The Devourers, who had never retreated from anything, ran from the light of a single princess and the human who held her hand. The Battle of Valera Prime was over. Jake caught Yuri as she collapsed. Her scales had changed. They were no longer pure silver or pale white. Now they shifted between silver and gold, like sunlight on water, marking her as something new, something that had never existed before. "Did we win?" she asked weakly. Jake held her close. "We won," she smiled and closed her eyes. Her breathing was shallow but steady. She would live. Far below, human and Valoran soldiers stood among the ruins of their battle, watching the swarm flee. They did not cheer. They were too tired, too relieved, too amazed to make any sound. But they knew that something had changed. Everything had changed. 3 months later, Jake and Yuri stood together in the Grand Hall of Prime, dressed in the ceremonial clothes of both their peoples. Around them, representatives from a dozen civilizations had gathered to witness their wedding. Emperor Tovan himself performed the ceremony, joining human and Valoran traditions in a way that had never been done before. When Jake and Yuri exchanged vows, they spoke in both languages, promising to love and protect each other until the stars themselves burned out. The celebration lasted for 3 days. Ambassadors from species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive sent gifts and messages of congratulations. The swarm, for the first time in galactic history, had been defeated. The species that made it possible were now the most respected in the known universe. But Jake did not care about politics or power. He only cared about the woman beside him whose scales shifted like living light whenever she laughed. Years passed, the alliance between Earth and Valora grew stronger. Human and Valoran soldiers trained together, fought together, built a future together. The swarm never returned. Jake and Yuri had children, 3 of them with scales that shimmered silver and gold and eyes that held both human warmth and luminary fire. They were something new, a bridge between 2 peoples, proof that different did not mean lesser. One evening when the children were playing in the garden of their home on Valora Prime, Yuri sat with Jake on their balcony watching the twin suns set. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Always, when you chose me at the ceremony, you couldn't have known about my powers. Not really. You took a chance." "Why?" Jake was quiet for a moment, then he took her hand, the same way he had taken it on the Nexus Tower, the same way he had held it every day. "Since I didn't choose your powers," he said, "I chose the woman who sat with dying soldiers and learned their names. I chose the woman who was kind when no one was watching. I chose the woman who saw me as a person, not a tool. Everything else was just a bonus." Yuri's eyes glistened. Even after all these years, his words could still touch her heart. "And you?" Jake asked. "Do you regret being chosen by a simple human soldier?" She laughed and leaned into him, her scales glowing softly against his skin. "Never," she whispered. "You saw what no one else could see. You changed everything." He kissed her forehead. "We changed everything together." Above them, the stars began to appear one by one, filling the darkening sky with ancient light. Somewhere out there, civilizations were rising and falling. Wars were being fought and won. History was being written. But here on this balcony, none clears throat of that mattered. A human soldier had chosen the least likely princess, and everything had changed forever, not because of politics or power or fate, because of love, because someone had looked past the surface and found something worth more than empires, and in the end that was the most human thing of